This episode is kindly sponsored by Nico AI. Across the student journey, internal teams are under pressure, not because they lack the right systems, but because those systems don't always work together smoothly. Important processes still rely on manual checks, chasing information across inboxes and moving data between platforms. Nico connects the systems you already have and automates the processes that sit between them without replacing your core platforms. The result is smoother operations, better visibility, and more consistent support for students even during peak periods. Visit nico.ai to learn more. I'm Susanna Marsden, a higher education consultant who helps to develop and support HE institutions in the UK and beyond. This podcast takes a deep dive into the roles of people who work in this hugely varied higher education sector. Each episode reveals what's involved in a specific role, the career path that led to it, and tips on how to get in and get on in these jobs. My guest in this episode is Sarah Beavon. Sarah has worked in higher education for over 20 years, moving through a series of increasingly senior roles to her current position as Chief Digital and Student Experience Officer and a member of the senior management team at Canterbury Christchurch University. In 2025, she was recognised as one of the top 100 innovators and changemakers of the year, reflecting her success with large-scale digital transformation projects. In releasing this episode close to International Women's Day 2026, Sarah reflects upon her career as a female IT leader, the importance of coaching and mentoring, what introverted or quiet leadership looks like, and what the future may hold to support aspiring digital leaders. Sarah, welcome to the podcast and thank you so much for being my guest today. You're a member of the senior management team at Canterbury Christchurch University, an institution at which you started out as Chief Digital Officer, but where more recently your remit now also includes Student and Academic Services. So that's two sizable professional services departments. Can you say a bit more about how that expanded role came about?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I mean, student journeys have become more and more digitised over the last few years, as we all know. And so when an opportunity came up internally at Canterbury Christchurch in an area that had been through a lot of disruption in the last few years, I really felt that there was an opportunity there where I could offer my knowledge of the university, because I knew that a lot of the processes and the systems, so I felt I could offer some stability to that area. But also it offered me an opportunity to expand my remit beyond IT and really get involved in all parts of the student journey from admissions onwards. So, it's a really varied role that I now have, as you say. It covers, admissions, student governance, quality, student records, libraries, wellbeing, and I haven't named them all, but I found it just absolutely fascinating, and it's been really enjoyable to be much closer to the reason why we're all here, students, and really understand what students want from us as a university. So from an SMT perspective, I would really recommend it to other SMT colleagues, to really take an opportunity when they can to get close to our students, our customers at the end of the day.
And as we've said, Student and Academic Services and IT, they're two sizable departments in any university. And in recently taking on that Student and Academic Services function alongside the IT one, as you say, what have been your initial observations about the similarities and differences between the two services? And what does that mean for your leadership approach?
I think that you can't assume as a leader when you take on a new area that you know how to lead that area. I think you need to take the time to get to know the people and what they need from you, how they like to be communicated with, and how they work, and to understand the sort of issues that they have, the problems that they have, everything about them really, before you start to sort of apply your leadership toolkit to supporting them. it's a much larger team that I've taken on than I had with IT. So you don't get the opportunity to build those close relationships with the bigger group of people that, I'm used to sort of building. So I'm really trying to make sure I take time to spend in sort of meetings with the team so that they get to know me in a sort of smaller arena rather than the sort of big department team meetings that we have that have got sort of 300 odd people in, and I get to know them on that sort of personal level. But they have very different wants and needs, and I need to make sure as a leader that I'm sort of adapting to them rather than expecting them to adapt to me.
We're recording this podcast episode close to International Women's Day 2026, and I'm interested to talk a bit more about your career background. You studied for a degree in computer science and gained first class honours. What was it that motivated you to study that discipline, and what was the gender balance environment like at that time?
I didn't really have a plan at that time. I left school when I was 16, which was not the plan. I had planned to do A-levels and I wanted to be a vet. So when I left school, I started working in different industries, sort of trying to find where my fit was. And in my early 20s, an opportunity arose for me to go to university. I was in a financial position where I could stop working and go to university. And I just didn't have a plan. And as I had always been very good at computers and enjoyed using them, I chose computer science and thought, well, let's give that a go. So there really wasn't a plan at the start of my career, I have to confess. And I think the gender balance was very much a male-dominated space at university. In fact, I remember a lecturer giving us a lecture on women in IT and sort of the progression of where women in IT had come from and sort of women creating the coding punch cards, etc. But he talked about the low numbers of women in IT. And it wasn't until that lecture that I actually looked around the lecture theatre and went, gosh, there's only 2 of us in here. Up until that point, it had just never occurred to me.
And after graduating, you went straight into a career in higher education, firstly in business analysis functions and then into successive leadership roles. Can you talk us through the main steps in your career path to date and why you choose the route that you have?
Yeah, so as part of my degree, I got to do sort of all the different parts of IT, from networking to programming, project management. But one of the modules that I did was business analysis, and I really enjoyed it. And I think it was at that point I thought, well, this might be how I fit into the IT world, because it definitely wasn't programming for me. That wasn't my key skill set. And so when I was lucky enough to get my first sort of role as a business analyst, I really love the variety that role gave me and the opportunity to work in all different parts of the university, putting in different systems, getting to meet different people, learning how they worked, how they did their jobs. And, that sort of variety I really, really enjoyed. But I got to a point where I thought, I really have a plan now where I want to progress my career up the leadership ladder. And at that point, I needed to go back to my IT roots and make sure that I had experience of running all the different areas of IT so that I had sort of a rounded CV to help me get that CIO role. But it also meant that I had to look outside of work for opportunities to fill leadership gaps, because you can't fill a gap if you're not doing the job. So I took on sort of school governance roles or things like my role as treasurer with UCISA to try and address some of those gaps on my CV. And then once I'd got sort of to Chief Information Officer, the next steps for me were to really start thinking about how do I expand my remit into other areas of the university and sort of try to take advantage of some of the knowledge and experience I'd gained from my business analysis roots, really.
And in your professional field, coming through that IT route originally, it would have been possible for you to move into a different sector to higher education. What is it about higher education that's motivated you to stay?
I think, as I said earlier, leaving school at 16, and then having the opportunity to go to university slightly later in life, I really value the opportunity that gave me, and the sort of career opportunities it opened up to me once I'd got that degree under my belt. And so I really have valued being able to stay in the sector and enable those opportunities to be given to others, especially in universities like Canterbury Christchurch. Some of our students are told at school that, there's no point even considering university because you won't, you're not capable of it. And yet they come to us and they leave sometimes with, a first class degree. And so being able to be part of the machine that gives those opportunities to others, I guess, is in some part my way of paying it forward.
You're part of a growing cohort of female digital leaders or chief information officers in UK higher education, but as I understand it, there's still an underrepresentation of females in digital leadership positions within the sector. What's been your experience of developing the career path that you talk to us about as a female in the profession across the last 20 years? And can you share some insight as to the visible or invisible gender-related barriers you've had to work through along the way?
I mean, as I said earlier, I never really saw gender. I've always just considered myself to be one of the team and never really take that sort of time to think about the sort of gender barriers. So sometimes I think I've probably been blind to some of the gender barriers in my career. But when I have faced a barrier, whether it's being gender related or not, I think I'm quite a stubborn personality, so it makes me even more determined to succeed. But I think not just for me, but other women that I see in the workplace, it can be things like your voice not really being heard in meetings, people listening to the sort of loudest voices in the room and assuming that they must know what they're talking about, or assuming that maybe the women in the room, if you're in a meeting full of men, that you're the non-technical person in the room. But I think I have been really lucky in my career in that I've had a lot of supporters, and I haven't really faced a lot of gender barriers in the higher education sector. And so maybe as a sector, we are quite lucky in that respect.
And you talked there about having a lot of supporters. To what extent have there been visible role models to support your career development?
There's absolutely been female role models, and they've been really supportive of my career. And, I'm still friends with them, a lot of them today. We keep in touch and continue to support each other. But as I said, there have been a lot of male supporters in my career who are equal in championing me and what I bring to the table. And I think don't always narrow your sort of field of supporters. I was in IT. It wasn't just people in IT that were supporting me in my career. It was people from across the whole university. So I think it's important to make sure you build those networks across your institution, but also in the sector as well, building that network of people to bounce ideas off, to sort of increase your knowledge of not just how your institution does things, but how other institutions work. All of that is really valuable in terms of building that network of supporters for your career.
I'm interested to explore a bit more about personality and leadership types. And I know from us meeting before recording today that you described yourself as an introverted leader. What do those introverted qualities look like in practice, and how have you and do you utilise them in your leadership role?
So listening, I think, is the key skill for me. I think it's really important to listen to people and to make informed decisions so that you can understand all perspectives before you make decisions. Especially as a leader, I'm not an expert in a lot of the areas that I now oversee. So I need to lean on the experts in my area and listen to them, learn about what will work and what won't work, because often they know, they work in that space day in, day out. They know what the problems are, and they generally have the ideas of how to fix them. And so my role is to be that voice at the top table for them, and to champion their area and champion what they need from us as a sort of senior management team. I think as an introverted leader, or a quiet leader as they sort of tend to call it nowadays, you can get underestimated a lot in meetings because you're a quiet voice or you don't speak for the sake of speaking. But I think if you are consistent in terms of delivering results, then they start to actually say, oh, hang on a minute, we need to listen to that voice. We need to pay attention because they know what they're talking about.
So it's very much through impact that you make your presence known.
Yes, absolutely.
What would you say have been the professional development experiences that you've most valued in your career so far, and why have those been important?
Coaching and mentoring, I think, has been the biggest thing for me in terms of really helping me develop my career. I've been really lucky to have some opportunities to take advantage of some coaching and mentoring, partly through the Aurora Leadership Programme for Women in HE from Advanced HE, but also through some of the other sort of internal opportunities, etc. But that time to really step outside of the day job and have that one-to-one conversation with somebody to reflect on you and your personality and your leadership style or the problem that you're dealing with and how to adapt, change, harness your skill set to overcome those obstacles. That's really where I've gained sort of the most development, I guess, of me and my career, over and above sort of training courses which give you that sort of increased skill set.
You've made a significant impact in the institutions in which you've worked across your career to date, and we just talked a moment ago about the importance of impact. And that impact has included implementation of institution-wide transformation of IT services, as well as overseeing the completion of other strategic projects. And you were recently named as one of the top 100 innovators and changemakers of 2025. What's been your approach to leading transformation within the institutions in which you've worked?
I think honesty has been the foundation of my approach. Be really honest with all the stakeholders about what you can achieve and what you can deliver, because often I think people overestimate and oversell. And being honest about how long something's going to take to deliver, what they're going to get at each stage of that delivery, it really improves the relationship and sets the expectations so that people aren't disappointed when they don't get the sort of full bells and whistles from day one. And really, I think breaking things down, I'm very much a sort of advocate of a more agile delivery process where we deliver small chunks incrementally rather than try and build the full singing and dancing system before we release it to sort of users. And as I've said before, involve stakeholders and get buy-in and really create a sort of joint delivery team, so that you're not everybody's involved in the creation of something that's going to be successful.
And I mean, digital or IT enabled transformation, it is really hard to do well. What are the main pitfalls that you see happening within the sector in that type of change, and how can those be addressed, especially within what's commonly now a financially constrained environment?
Yes, I mean, I think the pitfalls, unfortunately, are the same that we've had for a number of years. I don't think we've really sort of changed or addressed them. People always see the system as the solution that will fix all of their problems, and that's just not the case, and we need to learn that lesson. It's probably because suppliers have told them that the solution will fix all of their problems and that it will only take 6 weeks to implement, and that certainly isn't the case either. You really do need to start with, before you even think about the system, you need to think about your business processes. Where aren't they working now? What do you need to do to fix them and get them working? Once you really understand your business processes and how you need to change, then you can start thinking about systems. But processes, data, all of those sort of key fundamentals you need to think about first before you go to the system's going to fix everything solution.
And I guess it's looking at those processes. I mean, it can often be hard in an institution, can't it, where there are different types of processes being used in different schools or faculties, and actually deciding how much of that is going to become common and how much variation can there still be.
that is a real sector issue, that we allow so much variation across different areas of a university, which from an IT perspective would make much simpler if everybody just worked in a standardised way. That's how you implement a system as cheaply and as quickly as possible. As a senior management team, you need to make those difficult decisions about how quickly and how cheaply you want to implement something with that standardisation versus allowing that sort of variety. And is that variety actually going to improve the student experience or attract you more students at the end of the day? Because if it isn't, why would we be allowing extra investment?
You talked earlier about your determination to succeed and looking at what you've achieved in your career so far, both in relation to the leadership role that you hold and the strategic changes that you've delivered. To what extent has it been important to prove yourself as a female in this profession? And has that focus been about proving yourself to others or to yourself, or both?
I'm not sure I've ever felt I needed to prove myself as a woman. I've always just wanted to prove to myself that I could sort of take on the challenge. I had a very clear sort of career plan in mind. And for me, it was just a case of working through those milestones to get me to the next step on my career plan. Some people call it driven. I don't know what drives me, but I've always put a lot into making sure I get to where I want to get to on my career plan. But that I've never been able to do that alone. It takes a sort of army of people, not just your friends and family at home picking up the slack when you're out at governor meetings or various things outside of work, but also, as we talked about, those champions in work supporting you throughout your career.
And it sounds from some of the things that you've been saying so far, I mean, you talk about what motivates and drives you. I mean, the students, it sounds to me as if they're a big motivator for you in helping them to succeed and being a part of their journey.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, having children of my own now and seeing some of their struggles, I want to make sure that education is open to them and sort of everybody, really. As I said, since my degree, the opportunities that I've had in my career have been very different to the roles that I had pre-university. And so, it's really nice to see other people have access to those opportunities too.
We talked a bit earlier about the importance of role models, and you've supported the career development of a number of other people in your profession. And in 2025, you were shortlisted in the Role Model of the Year category for the Women in Tech Excellence Awards. Can you share some more about the role model or other initiatives happening through HE organisations such as UCISA, which is the professional body for digital professionals in education, to support females entering or progressing within the tech profession?
Absolutely. I mean, UCISA has a fabulous Women in Tech group that supports the sector and, arranges various webinars. They have an annual conference. But you can also access the mentoring program that UCISA run, and that's open to everybody, not just women. But it's a fantastic place for women to get mentoring from people outside of their institution at whatever stage of their career they are at. So, you don't have to be sort of thinking about CIO as your next step. You could be right at the start of your career. But I'd also recommend, if you are, whatever stage of your career you're at, thinking about whether you could offer some mentoring or coaching to others, because it's so rewarding that I always sort of feel a bit of a cheat when I sort of say I help others, because I still get a massive amount out of those sort of mentoring and coaching relationships that I have. So I think it really is a two-way street.
And what more do you think needs to happen in that space, whether that's through UCISA or more broadly, to encourage and support future or aspiring female IT professionals?
I think we really have to think about the sort of access that young girls have to IT sort of right from a very early age, primary school and secondary school, because they need to be able to picture themselves in careers in IT from that early stage, because I think often they're just not seeing those sort of career paths open to them, or they're not seeing that women in those roles, and therefore they can't picture themselves in those roles. And IT is such a varied career option now. You need to understand all of the different sort of opportunities that there are in the IT field. It isn't just about programming. There are so many roles available. But I think until we sort of really address some of those very early impressionable minds about, what the opportunities are, we won't see that progress through to sort of university and careers later in life.
Finishing up our conversation today and looking at the sector more broadly, the higher education sector more broadly, and into the longer term, there's a significant focus in the work of Universities UK and JISC, for example, to look at the potential of shared services between or across institutions, including those services which are digitally enabled. As a senior leader in the digital profession, what are your reflections on that prospect of what would be major sector transformation?
I mean, shared services seems to really be a no-brainer for me for professional service type areas of a university, where they're not adding distinction to your student experience. They're not a sort of unique selling point to students about why they should come to your university. And we're all doing very similar type activities with very similar type systems, because there isn't a lot of choice in the sort of IT systems within the HE sector. There's probably 2 or 3 suppliers for any type of system. So there really does seem an opportunity there in terms of shared services. However, as we said before, within one institution, we like to do things very differently across different schools, faculties, professional service departments. So I think the challenge for us as a sector to be able to agree a standard way of doing some things between more than one university is possibly going to be a step too far for us as a sector at the minute. I think unless it was really driven by central government, I'm not sure that, although people are willing and can see the opportunity there, that we're really going to see any movement in the short term around shared services.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a test case is going to be the merger of the University of Greenwich and University of Kent, isn't it? To see how even 2 institutions might be able to join together a bit more their underpinning services across time.
Yes, I mean, I think that will be an interesting one to watch, and I know, the sector is watching it very keenly. But ultimately, my understanding is they'll have one governance structure and sort of one leadership team in the new world, and I think that would be very different to several universities saying they'll sign up to shared services, where you've got to get multiple VCs, multiple SMTs, multiple governing bodies to implement those consistent processes, because you'll always have one that says, well, we need to do it just a little bit differently because of X, Y, and Z, and there's a valid business reason. That's where it will fall down. So unless you can really get that strong leadership, everybody's on board right at the start and all the way through, I'm not sure it will work.
And finally, how do you see the role of the University Chief Information Officer evolving into the future, including its career paths?
I mean, I think we're starting to see many CIOs expand their remit to become a sort of Chief Operating Officer, a sort of digital Chief Operating Officer, and it does feel like a real natural progression for a CIO. Many of us are already operating in a sort of operational space, delivering strategy. We understand the technology and the systems, the policies, but we know that you need to consider workflow and process to get the most out of those systems. And quite often we have a really good understanding of the full financial implications of delivering an operation or delivering change. And so it does really feel like a sort of natural progression for a Chief Information Officer to step into that COO type role. And I can see how they will be a natural asset to any Vice Chancellor in their sort of senior management team.
Sarah, it's been really interesting to talk to you today. Thank you so much again for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
The Association of Higher Education Professionals and the British University's Finance Directors Group, BUFDG, are both proud to support job shadowing HE as a valuable source of professional insight. The podcast was presented by Susanna Marsden, and you can find out more about her consultancy work at susannamarsden.co.uk. Audio production and music was by me, Rodri Marsden. Find out more about this podcast and hear previous episodes at jobshadowinghe.com.